They have locked her in the North Tower, your grace, and they mean to send her to the madhouse before the month is out. The words hung in the cold study of Grimsholt Castle, and Sebastian Thorn, Duke of Grimsholt, set down his glass very slowly and looked at the old man who had spoken. Roland had been steward at the neighbouring estate of Wexcombe for 40 years, and he was not a man given to drama. He stood twisting his hat in his gnarled hands, and there were tears standing in his rheumy eyes, and Sebastian, who trusted almost no one, trusted Roland. "Say that again," said the Duke, slowly, "and leave nothing out." He was called across 3 counties, the feared Duke of Grimsholt, and he had earned the name without trying and had never troubled to unearn it. He was a great scarred creature of a man, dark and silent. A soldier once and a hard master now, who kept to his cold northern castle above the sea, and let the world believe of him whatever it liked, that he was savage, that he had killed men with his hands, that his heart had gone to stone in some foreign war. Some of it was even true. He had gone to war a hopeful young man, and come home 4 years later carrying a scar down the left side of his jaw and a silence he could not seem to break, and he had buried himself at Grimsholt, and let the legend grow up around him like ivy over a ruin, because a man feared is a man left alone. And being left alone had seemed, for a long time, the most he could hope for from a life. But he was not a monster. That was the thing the county never troubled to learn. Beneath the scar and the silence and the terrible stillness, Sebastian Thorn had one governing article of faith, forged in a war where he had seen the strong grind the weak into the mud for sport, that a man's whole worth is measured by what he does for those who cannot defend themselves. He had never once in his life been able to stand by while the powerful crushed the powerless. It was the single thing that could bring him down out of his cold tower and into the world with fire in him. And Roland of Wexcombe had come, this bitter January night, to tell him a story precisely calculated, though the old man did not know it, to bring the feared Duke of Grimsholt down like a thunderbolt. "It's Miss Isolde, your grace," Roland said. "Miss Isolde Wexford. Old Sir Henry's daughter. You'll not have known her. She was but a girl when you went to the wars, but she's a woman grown now, near 24, and there was never a sweeter or a saner soul born, I'd swear it on my life, I who dandled her on my knee." His voice shook. "Sir Henry died 18 months past, and left everything, the whole Wexcombe estate, to Miss Isolde, for she was his only child by his first wife, God rest her. But he'd married again late, a hard cold beauty from London, the Lady Vain as was, and got no more children by her, and when he died she was left with nothing but a widow's portion and a hatred of the girl who had it all. And your grace," the old man's hands twisted the hat near to ruin, "she's been at her work ever since. Clever. Poisoning the girl's name a drop at a time." Sebastian had gone very still, in the way that had frightened braver men than Roland. "Go on." "First it was whispers. That Miss Isolde was nervous, not quite herself since her father died, given to strange fancies. The stepmother would say it's soft and sorrowful to every caller, shaking her head, so kind, so grieved. Then she turned off all the old servants who'd known the girl her whole life and would have spoken for her, turned us all off, your grace, one by one on invented faults, till there was none left in that house but the stepmother's own London people, who'd swear the moon was cheese if she paid them. And then, Roland's voice broke. Then a fortnight ago she called in 2 physicians, her physicians bought and paid for. And they examined Miss Isolde, a frightened girl of 24, alone with no friend in the world left to stand by her, and they wrote it down in a paper with a seal on it, that she is of unsound mind, a danger to herself, and must be confined. And they have locked her in the North Tower of her own house, that is her own house by her own father's will, and the stepmother has the keys, and the stepmother has the estate to manage in trust now. The girl's declared mad. And in 3 weeks a carriage comes from a private madhouse near York to take Miss Isolde away, and once she's inside those walls, your grace, she is lost. No one comes out of such a place. No one is believed after. The stepmother will have it all, and the girl will rot, and there is not one soul in the county with the power to stop it, save one." He looked up at the feared Duke of Grimsholt and made his last desperate throw. "I came to you, your grace, because they say you fear nothing and no one, and because I could think of no other door in England to knock upon. I have no right to ask it. I am an old turned-off servant, and you do not know me. But I dandled that girl on my knee, and I know she is no more mad than you or I. and I cannot let them take her without I have tried everything, even coming to the one man in the north cruel enough to frighten a stepmother. His voice failed entirely. Will you help her, sir? For God's sake, will you help her? The study was silent but for the fire and the sea booming far below the castle walls. Sebastian Thorn rose from his chair. He was a very large man, and when he stood the firelight threw his scarred shadow up the whole cold length of the study wall, and the old steward flinched despite himself. But when the Duke spoke, his deep, ruined voice was quiet, and there was something in it Roland had not expected, not menace, but a terrible controlled anger banked like a forge. You did not come to a cruel man, Roland, said the Duke of Grimsholt. You came to the right one. Sit. Eat something. You are grey with cold, and tell me the shape of that house, every door, every stair, every gate, and exactly where in the North Tower they have put her, and how many of the stepmother's London men are within the walls. And when precisely the York carriage is expected. He was already moving to the door, already calling for his horse to be saddled and his steward woken, already alight with the one purpose that could burn through his long silence. Because that carriage is not going to find her there. I am going to bring her out of that tower myself. And then Roland, the scarred face turned, and for one moment there was something in it that was almost a smile, and it was the most frightening and the most beautiful thing the old man had ever seen. Then I am going to teach the Lady Wexford exactly what it means to brand an innocent woman mad in my county. Go. We ride before dawn. He did not, in the end, ride in with torches and break the doors, though every furious instinct in him wanted to. Sebastian had been a soldier. He knew that a frontal charge would only get the girl bundled away the faster, and would give the stepmother's bought physicians 100 witnesses to swear the feared Duke of Grimsholt had abducted a madwoman by force. He needed her out of that tower, and he needed her sanity established beyond any lie, and he needed the whole rotten scheme dragged into daylight, where the law could not look away from it. That required patience and cunning and a cold head, and Sebastian, for all his fearsome silence, had a very cold head indeed when the cause was worth it. So he learned the house. Old Roland drew him every stair and passage. He learned that the stepmother, Lady Wexford, was away 3 days hence to dine and stay the night at a great house 12 miles off, meaning to secure her respectable friend's good opinion before the scandal of the girl's committal broke. He learned that she would take her personal maid and her steward with her, leaving the tower guarded by only 2 of her London men and an old porter. And he learned the one thing that decided everything, that Exiled Wexford's late father, Sir Henry, had loved his daughter, and had built into the North Tower long ago, in a fond and playful humour when she was small and frightened of storms, a narrow servant's stair, hidden behind the panelling, running from the tower chamber down to a postern in the garden wall, so that the child might slip down to the kitchens for warm milk on wild nights without waking the house. Lady Wexford, a Londoner who had lived at Wexcombe but 2 years, did not know it existed. Roland, who had carried the small girl up and down it 100 times, knew every step. On the 3rd night, with the stepmother safely 12 miles away at her dinner, the Duke of Grimsholt came for Exiled Wexford. He came on foot through the black winter garden with old Roland at his side and 2 of his own most trusted men behind, and he came to the postern in the wall, and Roland's shaking old hands worked a key long thought lost, and it turned. Within lay the hidden stair, narrow and cold and thick with the dust of the years since a child had last run down it. Sebastian went up it in the dark, silent as he had learned to be silent in the war, one broad hand trailing the stone wall, his heart, which he had believed long since gone to stone, beating hard against his ribs in a way he did not understand and did not stop to question. At the top the stair ended at the back of a panelled wall, and Roland whispered which panel, and Sebastian set his fingers to the seam and pressed. The panel gave with a small groan of old hinges. Beyond it lay the tower chamber, and there, on the far side of the room, past a narrow bed and a cold hearth and a bowered window through which the winter moon fell in bars of silver, a young woman came to her feet in the dark with her back against the wall and a broken shard of pottery held out before her in a hand that did not shake, ready, cornered, terrified, and utterly unbroken. "Come no nearer," said Exiled Wexford in a low clear voice that had not one note of madness in it. "I do not know who you are or how you have come, but I have been 3 weeks in this room being told I am mad by people who mean to profit by it, and I have decided that if I am to be dragged to a madhouse, I will at least mark whoever comes to drag me, so come no nearer. I am not the frightened creature they think me, and I will not go quietly. Sebastian Thorne stood very still in the broken panel, the moonlight falling across the great scar on his face, and he looked at her, at this girl they had branded mad. Standing alone and cornered and armed with a bit of broken crockery, defending herself with the last shred of dignity anyone had left her, and something happened in his chest that had not happened in a very long time, a kind of slow, enormous cracking, as of ice breaking up on a river after a long winter. "Miss Wexford," he said, and he kept his deep, ruined voice as gentle as he knew how, and did not move a muscle toward her. "My name is Sebastian Thorne. I am the Duke of Grimsholt, from over the moor. Your old steward Roland came to me, he is here, on the stair behind me, and will show himself if it eases you, because he could not bear to see you taken, and he could think of no one else with the power to stop it. I have not come to drag you anywhere. I have come to take you out of this tower, tonight of your own free will, to somewhere safe, where no bought physician and no scheming stepmother can touch you. I know you are not mad. I knew it before I set eyes on you, and I know it beyond all doubt now, for a mad woman does not defend herself so well." He held out one great scarred hand, palm up empty. "But I am a stranger and a fearsome-looking one, and you are right to trust no one, so I will not come to you." "Roland?" The old steward stepped through the panel behind him into the moonlight, weeping openly. "Miss Isolde," he quavered. "My little Isolde, it's Roland, child. I've brought you help. I've brought you the one man in England could face them down. Oh, my dear, I'm that sorry it took me so long." Isolde Wexford looked from the weeping old servant who had dandled her to the great, scarred, silent Duke standing so carefully still in the broken wall, his empty hand held out to her, and the shard of pottery slowly, slowly lowered. "Roland," she whispered. "Oh, Roland, they told me you were dead. They told me everyone had, that no one." Her voice broke, and Sebastian watched 3 weeks of terror and 3 months of slow poisoning and 18 months of a dead father and a hostile house crack open all at once. And the brave, cornered girl put her face in her hands and wept, but even as she wept she did not sink. She stood and steadied herself against the wall and mastered it, and lifted her wet face and fixed her eyes on the Duke with a fierce, clear intelligence that put the last nail in the coffin of any lie about her wits. "If I go with you," she said unsteadily, "they will say I fled. They will say a madwoman ran mad into the night. It will only prove their case. My stepmother is very clever, your grace. She has thought of everything. If I simply vanish, she wins." Sebastian felt that slow, enormous cracking in his chest complete itself. She was not only sane. She was cornered and terrified and half-starved, in a cold tower, thinking 3 moves ahead of the people destroying her, seeing the trap even as he offered to spring it. In 4 years of war and 36 years of life, he was not sure he had ever admired a living soul so much. "She has not thought of everything," he said quietly. "She did not think of me. Listen to me, Miss Wexford, and tell me if I am wrong, for I begin to think you see these things clearer than I do. I will not spirit you away into the dark to be called a runaway. I will take you tonight to the one place in this county her lies cannot follow you, to Grimsholt, under my protection and my roof, with my own household and a respectable widowed cousin of mine already sent for to lend you every propriety. And there you will be examined, not by her bought men, but by 3 honest physicians of my choosing, and by the magistrate, and by any respectable soul in the county who cares to come and speak with you and satisfy themselves of what I already know. We will not run from her lie. We will drag it into the daylight and let the whole county look at it, and you will stand there sane and clear-eyed in front of all of them, and it is your stepmother, not you, who will have to answer for what has been done in this house." He kept his hand held out, empty, patient. "But it must be your choice, and freely made. I will not so much as touch your sleeve without your leave. Will you come with me, Isolde Wexford? Will you let a fearsome stranger and a weeping old man carry you out of this tower, and give you back your name?" For a long moment Isolde Wexford looked at the great scarred Duke's empty, outstretched hand. Then she crossed the moonlit room, and set the broken shard of pottery down upon the little table, and laid her cold, thin hand in his. Yes, she said, take me out of here. And then, your grace. And there in the dark, half-starved and 3 weeks a prisoner, she lifted her chin and there was fire in it. Then help me take back what is mine. Sebastian Thorn closed his great hand very gently around her small one, as though it were made of glass, and something in his stone heart that had been silent since a foreign war 18 years before began quietly to beat again. The first days at Grimsholt were harder than either of them expected, and it was in the hardness that Sebastian came to know her and she him. For 3 weeks Exiled had held herself together by sheer will inside that tower, and now that she was safe the strain of it came due all at once. She slept badly. She woke in the black hours convinced she was still behind the barred window, and had to be talked back to herself by Mrs. Hartree, who slept in the adjoining room for exactly that purpose. She startled at the turn of a key in any lock. She could not for a long while bear to have a door shut fully upon her, and there were moments Sebastian saw them, and they wrung something in him when the long, patient cruelty of her stepmother's work showed its deepest mark. Moments when Exiled would stop in the middle of a sentence and go pale and ask, in a small, frightened voice utterly unlike her clear, brave one, I am speaking sense, am I not, you would tell me? If I were not, for that was the poison work deepest of all, not the locked door, but the 3 weeks of being told, patiently, reasonably, by people wearing masks of concern, that her own mind could not be trusted. Sebastian, who understood better than most what it was to have the war inside you go on long after the war outside is done, did the only thing he knew to do. He told her the truth every time plainly, without ever once making her feel a burden for asking. You are speaking perfect sense, he would say, quiet and certain. You always are. And you may ask me 100 times a day, and 100 times a day I will tell you the same, until the part of you that learned to doubt has learned to stop. There is no hurry, Exiled. We have all the time there is. He rearranged his whole cold, ordered household around her healing without ever making it seem an effort. He gave orders, quietly, so she should not feel watched, that no door in the castle was ever to be locked while she was under his roof, and Grimsholt, the fortress that had stood locked and guarded above its cliff for centuries, kept every door open all that winter for her. He learned which corridors were too dim and had them lit. He found that she steadied fastest out of doors, in the open, where no wall could close on her, and so he walked with her hours of it, along the wild cliff paths in the biting wind, saying little, letting the great sky and the endless sea do their slow work of teaching her body it was free. And on those walks, gradually she began to talk. She told him about her father, the fond, absent-minded, book-loving Sir Henry, who had built a secret stair for a frightened child and left an estate to a beloved daughter without once imagining the wolf he had married. She told him about the slow horror of the 18 months since, watching the loyal old faces disappear one by one, feeling the walls of whispers close in, and the particular loneliness of being disbelieved by everyone who mattered while wearing, to the world, the face of a well-cared-for stepdaughter. She told him, one grey afternoon on the cliff with the gulls crying below, the thing she had told no one, that there had come a night in the tower about the 2nd week, when she had stood at the barred window looking down at the courtyard stones far below and thought, with a terrible calm, that a fall would at least be an escape they could not spin into more proof of her madness, and that she had stepped back from the window and made herself a promise instead, that she would not give her stepmother the satisfaction, that she would live if only to be a reproach, and had held to that promise by her fingernails ever since. Sebastian stopped walking when she said it. He stood very still on the cliff path, and the wind took his great coat, and for a moment the banked forge of his anger flared so hot he could not speak. Then he mastered it, because she did not need his rage, she needed his steadiness. I am glad you made that promise, he said, low and rough. And I am glad, more than I have words for, that you kept it. Do you know what I thought, Exiled, when I came through that panel and saw you standing there with a broken pot held out, ready to fight a stranger twice your size? I thought I had never in my life, in 4 years of war among brave men, seen courage to touch it. They did everything a human soul can do to break you patiently for months, and they did not break you. Not the locked door, not the whispers, not even your own doubt. You are the least mad and the least breakable person I have ever encountered, and I have known some hard men. He turned to face her fully. You will heal from this. I promise you that. The startling at locks, the waking in the night, the asking, it will fade. Not because you are weak and it must be endured, but because you are strong and it will lose. I have watched my own war go quiet over the years. Yours will too, and you will not do it alone. Whatever else comes of all this, you will never be alone in it again. That I can promise you, whatever else I cannot. Exiled looked at him for a long moment, the wind whipping her dark hair across her face. You keep saying whatever else, she observed, with a flicker of the dry clear wit that was returning to her day by day. As though there were some line you have set yourself that you will not cross. As though you have decided, all on your own, exactly how much of your care I am permitted to notice. Sebastian looked away, out to sea. The scar stood pale against his flushed jaw. You are a young woman I pulled out of a tower, he said, with difficulty. You are dependent at present on my protection. You are healing from a great cruelty. It would be the act of a scoundrel, a worse scoundrel than the county already thinks me, to let you imagine at such a time that my care for you was anything other than a man's plain duty to a wronged soul. When you are whole again and home and free, and want for nothing, you will see me clearly, and see that I am a scarred silent recluse 12 years your elder whom children are frightened in the market, and you will be glad I never presumed. So there is a line, yes, and I will not cross it. Do not ask me to. Exiled was quiet. And then she did a thing that stopped his heart. She reached out in the wind and laid her gloved hand over his where it gripped the cold stone of the cliff wall, gently, the way he had held his empty hand out to her in the tower, asking nothing, only there. I will not ask you to cross it today, she said softly. You are right that I am still healing, and right that a good man waits. I have learned this winter exactly how rare a good man is, and I will not have you be less than one even for my sake. Her hand tightened on his. But you are wrong about the rest, Sebastian Thorn. You are wrong that I will see you clearly and be glad you never presumed, because I already see you clearly. Clearer, I think, than you see yourself. And the scar and the silence and the 12 years and the frightened children in the market are not obstacles I am generously overlooking. They are simply you, the you that came for me in the dark. And there is nothing in the whole of it I would change. She released his hand and stepped back, composed, giving him the space he had asked for. So keep your line for now and heal me and give me back my name. I am content to wait. But do not, Sebastian, and here the fire came back into her clear eyes. Do not make the mistake of thinking the waiting is because I have not yet decided. I decided in the tower. I am only waiting for you to be brave enough to be told. And she turned and walked on ahead of him along the cliff, upright in the wind, and Sebastian Thorn stood rooted to the path and watched her go, and felt the last defences of 18 silent years give way beneath him like a cliff edge in a storm, and found, to his very great astonishment, that he was not afraid of the fall at all. He brought her to Grimsholt before dawn, wrapped in his own greatcoat against the killing cold, and his household, who feared him and loved him in equal measure, the way people do a hard master who has never once been unjust, took the half-frozen young woman in and warmed her and fed her. And his widowed cousin Mrs. Hartree, sent for in advance, installed herself as chaperone and duenna and, within a day, fierce partisan. And then the feared Duke of Grimsholt set about, methodically and without mercy, the destruction of Lady Wexford's lie. He did not go to war with torches. He went to war with witnesses. He sent for the 3 most respected physicians in the north, men whose names no bought scheme could touch, and he did not tell them what he wanted them to find. He simply asked them to spend as many hours as they required in conversation with Miss Exiled Wexford, and to tell him honestly whether they saw in her any particle of unsound mind. They spent 2 days with her. Exiled, who had feared she would be nervous under their eyes, found instead that she was steady, because for the first time in 18 months she was among people who wished her well, and the physicians talked with her of her father, of the estate, of books and figures and the management of land, and came away shaking their heads in slow anger. And each wrote out, and signed, and sealed a plain statement that Miss Exiled Wexford was as sane as any woman in England, that she showed a mind unusually clear and capable, and that in their considered professional judgment the earlier certificate of insanity was either a gross incompetence or a deliberate fraud. Sebastian took those 3 sealed papers, and the sworn testimony of old Roland and the other turned-off servants he had gathered, and he laid the whole of it before the magistrate of the county, who was, as it happened, a fair man, and who had been made deeply uneasy by the Wexcombe business, but had lacked the standing to challenge a matter closed by 2 physicians' seals. With the Duke of Grimsholt behind it, and 3 unimpeachable physicians against 2 bought ones, and a chorus of loyal old servants, the magistrate found he could act after all. An inquiry was ordered. The 2 physicians who had signed the false certificate, faced with ruin and the perjury laws, cracked within the hour and named Lady Wexford as the author of the whole scheme and the payer of their fee. And the whole rotten edifice of the stepmother's cruelty, which had stood so long only because no one with power had troubled to push at it, fell in a single week. Lady Wexford did not go quietly. She raged, she wept. She called the Duke of Grimsholt a savage who had abducted her stepdaughter and coerced physicians, and for a day or 2 her London polish and her poisonous tongue nearly turned the tide, for the county was half inclined to believe the worst of the feared Duke, as the county always had been. But then Exiled Wexford herself walked into the magistrate's inquiry, upright and clear-eyed and dressed with quiet dignity, and stood before the assembled respectable men of the county whom her stepmother had so carefully cultivated, and spoke. She did not weep, she did not rail. She simply told the plain truth, in a low clear voice, with the same fierce clear intelligence that had thought 3 moves ahead in the tower, how her father had loved her and left her his estate, how her stepmother had turned off every servant who could speak for her, how the whispers had begun and grown, how she had been locked in the north tower of her own house and told, day after day, that she was mad, until she had begun in the loneliness and terror to half-doubt her own mind. For that, she said, and her voice did not waver, is the cruelest part of what was done to me, gentlemen, not the locked door, but the patient, deliberate attempt to make me disbelieve my own reason. I stand before you to tell you that it did not succeed. I know exactly who I am, and exactly what was done to me, and exactly why. And I ask only that you look at me and listen to me and judge for yourselves whether you are looking at a madwoman, or at a woman who was very nearly robbed of her name, her fortune, and her freedom by someone who counted on no one caring enough to look. They listened. And there was not a man in that room, when she had finished, who'd pretend to believe the lie any longer. It was over quickly after that. Lady Wexford, faced with the collapse of her scheme and the perjury of her own physicians and the ruin of her good name in the county she had worked so hard to charm, fled south to London before the law could close on her fully, and Exiled, who might have pursued her to prison, chose instead to let her go. I want my life back, she said, not her destruction. Let her carry what she has done. That is punishment enough. The Wexcombe estate was restored to Exiled Wexford, whole and hers, her father's will upheld, her sanity affirmed by seal on inquiry and the plain word of the county, her name given back to her clean. And through all of it, at every step, the feared Duke of Grimsholt had been at her side. He had told himself at the start that it was only the old cause, the strong grinding the weak, the thing he could never stand by and watch. But somewhere in those weeks, sitting up late with her over the estate papers, watching her fierce, clear mind unravel her stepmother's frauds faster than his lawyers could, listening to her laugh, cautiously at first, then freely, as the terror slowly loosened its grip on her. He had understood that it had stopped being about the cause a long while since. He had spent 18 years in a silence he could not break, believing his heart had died in a foreign war. It had not died. It had only been waiting all that long cold time for someone worth breaking the silence for. On the evening the estate was formally restored to her, Exiled found him alone on the sea-battered walls of Grimsholt, looking out at the winter water, and she came and stood beside him, and for a while neither spoke. I am to go home tomorrow, she said at last, to Wexcombe. It is mine again, thanks to you. I have a whole life to take back up, an estate to run, servants to bring home, a house to make my own. She was quiet a moment. And I find I do not want to go. Sebastian's scarred hands tightened on the cold stone. He did not turn. You must go, he said low. It is your home. It is yours. I did not fight to give you back your freedom in order to keep you from it. No, Isolde agreed. She stepped closer so that she stood at his side looking out at the same dark sea, her shoulder nearly against his arm. You are not that kind of man. That is rather the difficulty, Sebastian. She had never used his name before either. He felt it go through him like the first crack of the ice in the tower. You came for me when no one else in England would. You carried me out of that tower, and you never once touched my sleeve without my leave. You gathered your witnesses, and you dragged the lie into the daylight, and you gave me back my name, my mind, my whole self, and you asked nothing, nothing at all, in return. You would let me walk home to Wexcombe tomorrow, and never speak of what is plainly between us. Because you are too much a gentleman and too little a believer in your own worth to ask a woman you rescued to imagine she owes you her heart. She turned to face him and made him turn to face her. And she looked up at the great scarred silent Duke whom the whole county feared and whom she had come, in a handful of weeks, to see clearer than anyone alive. So I shall have to be the one to say it, since you never will. I am not offering you my hand out of gratitude, Sebastian Thorn. Gratitude I could repay in a letter. I am telling you that in the whole of my life the only place I have ever felt truly safe, truly seen, truly myself, is at your side, that a man they call a monster took more care of my dignity in 3 weeks than the world took in 24 years. And that I do not want to go home to Wexcombe alone, because I have found, to my very great surprise, that home is not a house at all. It is you. Her voice trembled just once and steadied. So I am asking you, will you have me? Not the rescued girl. The whole woman, with her estate and her stubbornness and her hard-won sanity and her heart, which appears to have become entirely yours somewhere on a hidden stair in the dark. Will you have me, Sebastian? For a long moment the feared Duke of Grimsholt could not speak at all. The sea boomed below the walls. The winter wind took her dark hair and his great coat, and the last of the ice that 18 silent years had built around his heart broke up entirely and went out to sea. Exiled, he said at last, and his deep ruined voice cracked clean through on her name. I have been silent for 18 years because I thought there was nothing left in me worth speaking for. I came for you meaning only to right a wrong and go back to my tower and my silence and be alone, because being alone was the most I dared to want, and instead I found. He lifted one great scarred hand, slowly, and with infinite care touched her cold cheek, the first time he had touched her ungiven, and she leaned into it. I found the one soul in the world who looked at the monster and was not afraid, and looked at the wreck the war left and saw a man still standing in it. I have nothing to give you that you have not already given back to yourself, only this heart which I believed was stone, and which you have somehow set beating again. It is yours. It has been yours, I think, since you lifted that shard of pottery and told a duke to come no nearer. Yes, I sold Wexford. God knows I am not worthy of it, but yes, 1,000 times yes. I will have you, and I will spend the rest of my life making certain that no one ever again teaches you to doubt your own worth. You are the sanest, bravest, truest soul I have ever known, and I will tell you so every morning of our lives until you are tired of hearing it. I shall never be tired of hearing it, said Exiled, and she was laughing and weeping both at once, from you, and she rose on her toes. There on the wild sea-battered walls of Grimsholt, and the feared Duke of Grimsholt bent his scarred head, and the wind and the sea and the winter stars were the only witnesses. They were married at Grimsholt in the spring, when the sea had gentled and the moor had greened, and old Roland, restored to his stewardship, and weeping harder than anyone, gave the bride away, for she would have no one else. I sold Wexford, who had been branded mad and locked in a tower and nearly lost to the world, became Duchess of Grimsholt, and ran her own Wexcombe estate and half her husband's besides with a clear head and a firm hand, and the county that had once feared the monster of Grimsholt came, in time, to understand the truth old Roland had known all along, that behind the scar and the silence had always stood the one man in the north who could not, would not, ever stand by while the strong crushed the weak, and that it had taken a woman brave enough to hold out a broken shard of pottery against him to teach him, at last, that he was worth loving. He never went back to the silence. She never let him, and Grimsholt, which had been a cold ruin above a cold sea, became, against every expectation of the county, the warmest house in 3 counties, because there is no warmth in all the world quite like the warmth of two people who were each alone, half frozen, and who found in one another the thing worth thawing for.